Hello everyone, welcome to Realist Quill. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Tonight I'll share disturbing accounts from university campuses across the country, places where ambitious students sought education but found terror instead. Universities have always harbored dark secrets behind their ivy-covered walls, and beneath their manicured quads lie centuries of buried history, tragic accidents, unexplained deaths, and phenomena that challenge everything we think we know about reality. While most students worry about midterms and student loans, a select few encounter something far more disturbing during their academic journey. These institutions of higher learning, with their sprawling campuses and labyrinthine buildings, create perfect conditions for the unexplained. Old dormitories with paper-thin walls amplify every creak and whisper. Libraries built over forgotten graveyards seem to pulse with residual energy. Underground tunnels and sealed-off wings harbor secrets that administrations desperately want to keep hidden. What you're about to hear are 5 true accounts that will make you question whether some forms of knowledge come at too high a price. These stories blend documented history with terrifying personal experiences, creating a tapestry of campus horror that will linger long after you close your eyes tonight. Sarah Chen thought she'd found the perfect spot to study when she discovered the small courtyard behind Hawthorne Hall. The secluded area, surrounded by ancient oak trees, offered peace away from the bustling main campus. What she didn't know was that she'd chosen to do her homework directly above the college's most shameful secret. It was October 1974 when groundskeepers doing routine maintenance struck something hard with their shovels. At first, they assumed it was a large rock or piece of old construction debris. Instead, they unearthed a weathered gravestone bearing the inscription, Mary Caldwell, age 19, taken too soon, 1847. Word spread quickly among the maintenance staff. One stone became 2, then 5, then dozens. They had discovered an entire cemetery buried beneath what was now the college's most popular study area. But these weren't ordinary graves. They were the final resting places of young women who had died under mysterious circumstances in the mid-1800s, long before Meridian College was even established. The college administration acted swiftly to contain the situation. They cordoned off the area, claiming a gas leak required immediate attention. Within 48 hours, concrete had been poured over the entire courtyard, and new landscaping was installed. The official story was that the college had decided to modernize the space with better drainage. But Sarah Chen had been studying in that courtyard almost every day for 2 months before the discovery. She had noticed things, strange things, that she initially dismissed as products of academic stress and too much caffeine. First came the whisper. At night, when she'd sneak out to study under the lamppost, she'd hear what sounded like young women's voices, carrying on conversations just beyond the edge of hearing. When she'd turn toward the sound, the voices would stop abruptly, leaving only the rustle of leaves. Then there were the cold spots. Even on warm autumn evenings, certain areas of the courtyard would drop in temperature so dramatically that Sarah's breath would become visible. These spots seemed to move, never appearing in the same location twice. The most disturbing incidents involved her study materials. She'd set down her books and notes, only to return from a brief bathroom break to find them rearranged in perfect geometric patterns, configurations that made no logical sense, but felt deeply intentional. Pages from her notebook would be torn out and folded into origami-like shapes, always the same design, a crude representation of a young woman with her arms crossed over her chest. After the cemetery discovery, Sarah began researching the history of the land. What she found in the town's historical archives chilled her to the bone. Between 1845 and 1849, 23 young women between the ages of 16 and 22 had died in the area, all under remarkably similar circumstances. They had been students at a short-lived experimental school called the Caldwell Institute for Young Ladies. The institute, run by a mysterious figure named Dr. Ezekiel Marsh, claimed to offer advanced education in the natural sciences and metaphysical art. Contemporary newspaper accounts described the school as progressive, attracting ambitious young women from wealthy families across New England. But something went horribly wrong. The deaths began slowly. One girl found dead in her dormitory room, apparently from a weak heart. Another discovered at the bottom of a staircase, her neck broken from what was ruled an accidental fall. Within 4 years, nearly 24 students had perished, each death explained away by convenient accidents or sudden illness. The Caldwell Institute closed abruptly in 1849, after the local sheriff began asking uncomfortable questions about the unusually high mortality rate. Dr. Marsh disappeared overnight, leaving behind only a cryptic note that read, "The greatest knowledge requires the ultimate sacrifice." They understood this better than anyone. The families of the deceased girls demanded their daughters be returned for proper burial in their hometowns. But when the graves were opened, they were found to be empty. Dr. Marsh had vanished with the bodies, and they were never recovered. The empty graves were eventually filled with concrete and forgotten as the town moved on from the scandal. Sarah's research revealed that Meridian College had purchased the land in 1924, fully aware of its grisly history. The college's board of trustees had actually commissioned a survey of the property that specifically noted the presence of unmarked graves and potential burial sites. They chose to build anyway, believing that 75 years was long enough for any local superstitions to fade. But the dead, it seemed, had other plans. After the 1974 discovery and subsequent cover-up, reports of paranormal activity on campus increased dramatically. Students living in Hawthorne Hall, which sat directly adjacent to the former cemetery, began experiencing disturbing phenomena. Room temperatures would plummet without warning. Electronics would malfunction in specific patterns, lights flickering in sequences that spelled out words like remember and justice in Morse code. Most unsettling were the dreams. Multiple students reported nearly identical nightmares featuring young women in period dress, standing in their dormitory rooms, pointing accusingly while their mouths moved in silent screams. These dream figures would slowly approach the sleeping students, reaching out with pale, cold hands before the dreamers would wake in terror. The college counseling center saw a significant uptick in students seeking help for anxiety, depression, and what many described as an overwhelming sense of being watched. Patricia Reeves, who served as head counselor from 1975 to 1992, later admitted in a private interview that she had never seen anything like the cluster of psychological disturbances that began after the courtyard incident. It was as if something had been awakened, she said. These weren't typical college adjustment issues. Students were describing experiences that defied rational explanation, and they were all remarkably consistent in their details. The most disturbing case involved Jennifer Walsh, a sophomore majoring in psychology. In November 1974, just weeks after the cemetery discovery, Jennifer began keeping a detailed journal of supernatural encounters in her dorm room. Her entries, later obtained by campus journalists, revealed a pattern of escalating paranormal activity. The journal began with minor incidents. Heard someone crying in the wall behind my bed. Asked roommate if she heard it too. She said no. Within days, the entries became more frantic. Someone keeps rearranging my books. They're always placed to spell words. Help, trapped, cold. Jennifer's final entry, dated December 3rd, 1974, was barely legible. They're getting stronger. I can see them now, standing at the foot of my bed. They want me to come with them. They say Dr. Marsh is still waiting. They say the experiment isn't finished. Jennifer Walsh was found the next morning, catatonic, in the basement of Hawthorne Hall. She was kneeling in front of a wall that, according to campus blueprints, should have been solid foundation concrete, but the wall had somehow developed a crack, a perfectly straight fissure running from floor to ceiling. When maintenance workers investigated, they discovered that the crack led to a hollow space behind the wall. Inside, they found a leather-bound journal belonging to Dr. Ezekiel Marsh, along with detailed anatomical drawings and what appeared to be instructions for some kind of ritual involving the transference of essential life energy. Jennifer never spoke again. She was quietly transferred to a private psychiatric facility, and her family received a generous settlement from the college in exchange for their silence. A crack in the basement wall was sealed with steel-reinforced concrete, and that section of the building was permanently closed to students. But the hauntings continued. Every few years, a new incident would surface, always involving young women, always connected to areas of campus built over the original cemetery. Security guards reported seeing figures in period dress walking across the courtyard late at night. Motion sensors would trigger in empty biddies, and security cameras would capture unexplained shadows moving through locked hallways. The college developed an unofficial protocol for handling these incidents. Students who reported supernatural experiences were immediately transferred to other dormitories and offered counseling with specific therapists who had signed non-disclosure agreements. Physical evidence, photographs, recordings, damaged property would disappear from student rooms overnight. In 1995, during a renovation of Hawthorne Hall, construction workers made another disturbing discovery. Hidden behind a false wall in the building's cornerstone, they found a metal box containing 23 small portraits, daguerreotypes of young women, each one matching the descriptions of girls who had died at the Caldwell Institute. But these weren't ordinary photographs. Each portrait showed its subject with eyes that appeared to be looking directly at the viewer, no matter what angle the image was viewed from. More disturbing still, the photographs seemed to change over time. Workers who handled them reported that the subject's expressions would shift from peaceful to anguished to accusatory over the course of several days. The college administration immediately confiscated the photographs and sealed them in the institution's private archive. According to a leaked memo from the college president, the images were deemed potentially dangerous to campus morale and institutional reputation. Today, more than 50 years after the cemetery discovery, Meridian College maintains its official position that all supernatural claims are the result of student stress, urban legends, and overactive imaginations. The concrete courtyard remains a popular study spot, and most current students are unaware of what lies beneath their feet. But those who know the true history of the campus watch for the signs. On certain nights, when the air is still and the temperature drops without warning, you can still hear the whispers. Young women's voices, speaking in languages that predate the college by centuries, calling out for justice that has never come. The groundskeepers who made the original discovery in 1974 are all retired or deceased now. But one, Thomas Mueller, broke his silence in a 2018 interview with a local newspaper. His words serve as a chilling reminder that some secrets refuse to stay buried. "We knew we were disturbing something that should have been left alone," he said. "But the college wanted that courtyard finished. No matter what we found down there, they thought they could just cover it up and move on. But you can't build a future on a foundation of bones and lies. Those girls are still down there, and they're still waiting for someone to tell their story." The Caldwell Institute's victims were never given proper burials. Their bodies were never found, and according to those who've experienced the ongoing phenomena at Meridian College, their spirits have never found peace. Ezekiel Marsh's journal, sealed away in the college archives, contains a final entry that administrators desperately hope will never see the light of day. Death is not the end of education. It is merely the beginning of a more profound curriculum. My students continue their studies even now, and they are eager to share what they have learned with a new generation. Some lessons, it seems, are too dangerous to teach, but in the halls of Meridian College, class is always in session. Madison Torres thought she'd won the housing lottery when she was assigned to room 27 in Kellner Hall. The single occupancy room on the second floor offered privacy that most freshmen could only dream of, and the Gothic architecture of the 1920s building gave her dormitory a stately academic atmosphere that made her feel like she was attending a real university rather than a commuter school. What Madison didn't know was that room 27 had been a single occupancy room for the past 3 years, not by design, but by necessity. No student had been able to room with a partner there for more than a few weeks without requesting an immediate transfer. The first sign that something was wrong came during move-in day, in August 2019. As Madison's parents helped her carry boxes up the narrow staircase, her father made an offhand comment that would prove prophetic. "It's awfully cold in here for summer, isn't it?" The temperature in room 27 consistently registered 15 to 20 degrees lower than the hallway outside, despite maintenance repeatedly checking the heating and cooling system. The university's explanation was that the room's position at the corner of the building created unique airflow patterns that couldn't be easily corrected. They offered Madison a small discount on her housing fees and suggested she invest in extra blanket. For the first month, Madison attributed the strange experiences to typical college adjustment stress. She was homesick, overwhelmed by coursework, and struggling to make friends. When she began hearing whispers late at night, she assumed it was conversations from adjacent rooms carrying through the old building's thin wall. But the whispers were never quite clear enough to understand, and they seemed to come from directly behind her headboard, rather than from neighboring rooms. Madison tested this theory by staying up late and listening carefully to the sounds in the hall. The building was genuinely quiet after midnight, so quiet that she could hear her own heartbeat. Yet the whispers continued, soft and persistent, just at the edge of comprehension. By October, the whispers had developed a pattern. They began every night at exactly 3:17 a.m. and continued for precisely 23 minutes. Madison started timing them with her phone, creating a log that would later become crucial evidence in understanding what was happening in room 27. The whispers weren't random murmurs. They followed the cadence and rhythm of someone reciting text, possibly reading aloud or reciting from memory. Madison began to distinguish what sounded like individual words: remember, promise, help, and most disturbingly, her own name. At first, she thought she was imagining the personal references. Sleep deprivation and stress could certainly cause auditory hallucinations. But when she started recording the whispers with her phone, the playback confirmed her fear. A soft, feminine voice was indeed calling her name, over and over, with increasing urgency. The recordings also revealed something Madison hadn't noticed in real time. The voice was coming through her cell phone speaker, even when the device was turned off. The audio files showed sound signatures that began recording before she had activated the recording app, as if something was using her phone as a communication device without her knowledge. Madison's roommate situation had been unusual from the start. She had been assigned a single room after her original roommate, Ashley Kim, had requested an emergency transfer just 2 days into the semester. The resident advisor, Jake Morrison, had been vague about Ashley's reasons for leaving, citing only personal compatibility issues. Curious about her predecessor, Madison looked up Ashley on social media and sent her a private message. Ashley's response came within hours and contained details that made Madison's blood run cold. "I only lasted 2 nights in that room. Something was wrong from the moment I moved in. My belongings would be moved around when I wasn't there, not just shifted, but rearranged in specific patterns. My textbooks would be stacked to spell out words, and my clothes would be folded into shapes that looked like letters. But the worst part was the voice. Every night at the same time, someone would call my name from inside the wall. I recorded it happening and played it for the RA, but he said it was probably just old pipes. That's when I knew I had to get out." Ashley agreed to meet Madison at the campus coffee shop, where she shared even more disturbing details. She had researched the history of room 27 and discovered that over the past decade, the room had housed more than 30 different students, with the average stay being less than 6 weeks. Most had requested transfers citing incompatible living arrangements or personal issues, but a few had been more specific in their complaints. In 2017, a sophomore named Brian Walsh had filed a formal complaint with campus housing, claiming that someone was entering his room at night and leaving threatening messages written in condensation on his mirror. Security cameras in the hallway showed no unauthorized access to the room, and Brian's keycard records indicated that only he had entered or exited the space during the times the messages appeared. The messages themselves were chilling. "You don't belong here. This is my space." And most disturbing, "Sarah is coming back soon." Brian had photographed the messages before they evaporated, and Ashley had copies of the images. The handwriting, if it could be called that, appeared to be formed by a finger tracing through condensation, but the letters were perfectly formed and evenly spaced, as if written by someone with years of practice. Madison learned that the name Sarah had appeared in connection with room 27 before. In 2015, a freshman named Michael Torres, no relation to Madison despite the shared surname, had reported that someone was writing Sarah's room on his bathroom mirror almost daily. When Michael covered the mirror with paper, the writing would appear on his bedroom window. When he covered the window, it would show up on his laptop screen when the device was turned off. The pattern was becoming clear. Room 2013 was home to an entity that identified as Sarah, and she was becoming increasingly territorial about her space. Madison decided to research further, digging into the university archives and local newspaper records. What she found was a tragedy that the university had worked hard to keep buried. In March 1987, a junior named Sarah Elizabeth Chen had been found dead in room 237 of Kellner Hall. The official cause of death was listed as suicide by overdose, but the circumstances surrounding her death raised questions that were never satisfactorily answered. Sarah had been an exemplary student, Dean's List every semester, president of the psychology club, and a resident advisor known for her dedication to helping other students. She had no history of depression or mental health issues, and friends described her as optimistic about her upcoming graduation and graduate school plans. The night Sarah died, she had been working on her senior thesis, a research project examining cases of unexplained death among college students. Her faculty advisor, Margaret Willis, later told investigators that Sarah had become obsessed with patterns she believed she was discovering in student mortality data across universities in the region. Sarah's research notes, found scattered around room 237 after her death, contained detailed timelines of student death dating. She had identified what she believed were clusters of suspicious death that occurred in 7-year cycles, always involving students who lived in specific dormitory rooms. According to her research, room 237 itself had been the site of 4 previous student deaths since Kellner Hall was built in 9. Each death had been ruled accidental or suicide, but Sarah's notes suggested a different pattern. Each student had spent months documenting supernatural experiences before their death, and each had left behind evidence of communication with entities they believed were previous occupants of the room. The most disturbing element of Sarah's research was her discovery of a maintenance log from 1920. The log noted that room 237 had required extensive cleaning and renovation due to unusual staining and damage that had occurred despite the room being unoccupied for most of the academic year. Sarah's final journal entry, dated the day of her death, read, "They've been trying to tell me something for months. I finally understand. This room isn't haunted. It's a trap. Something is collecting us, one by one, and using our energy to grow stronger. I can feel it happening to me now. I'm becoming part of whatever lives in these walls. If someone finds this, don't let them cover it up again. Don't let them put another student in this room." After Sarah's death, room 237 was sealed for an entire academic year, while the university conducted what they called routine maintenance. In reality, they brought in specialists to examine the space for everything from gas leaks to structural problems that might cause hallucination. The specialists found nothing wrong with the room itself, but several noted unusual electromagnetic readings that seemed to spike at regular intervals, specifically at one paranormal investigator, brought in at the insistence of Sarah's family, recorded what he described as residual energy patterns, consistent with a consciousness that refuses to dissipate. The university chose to ignore these findings and reopened the room the following year, implementing a policy of housing only single occupants and carefully screening applicants to avoid placing sensitive students in the space. Armed with this knowledge, Madison faced a choice. She could request an immediate transfer and become another statistic in room 27's long list of brief occupants, or she could stay and try to understand what Sarah and the other entities in the room were trying to communicate. She chose to stay. Madison began responding to the whispers, speaking aloud during the nightly 3:17 a.m. sessions and asking direct questions. The results were immediate and terrifying. The whispers became clearer, more urgent, and began providing specific information about events happening elsewhere on campus. "Check on Emma in 314, the voice would say, and Madison would discover the next day that Emma Martinez, in room 314, had indeed been struggling with a crisis, a family emergency, academic probation, or relationship problems that Madison had no way of knowing about. The entity seemed to be monitoring the entire dormitory, aware of every student's private struggles and secrets. But more disturbing was its growing focus on Madison herself. The voice began sharing details about Madison's own life that no one else could have known. Childhood traumas she'd never discussed, family secrets she'd discovered but never shared, and dreams she'd had but never remembered clearly until the voice described them in perfect detail. "You understand now," the voice said one night in November. "We're not haunting this room. We're protecting it. This place is a doorway, and something is trying to come through. We stay here to keep it closed." Madison learned that the students who had died in room 27 weren't victims, they were guardians. Each had discovered the truth about the room and chosen to remain as sentries, preventing something far worse from entering the physical world. But maintaining this vigil came at a cost. The longer Madison stayed in the room, the more she could feel her own life force being drawn into the collective consciousness that watched over Kellner Hall. She was becoming weaker, more tired, and increasingly disconnected from the world outside her dormitory. By December, Madison's friends were expressing concern about her dramatic weight loss and increasingly erratic behavior. She had stopped attending most of her classes, spending her days sleeping and her nights in conversation with the voices that now spoke to her constantly. The voices belonged to Sarah Chen and the 4 other students who had died in room 27 over the decades. They had formed a psychic barrier that prevented something they called the Collector from using the room as an entry point into the physical world. According to the voices, the Collector was an entity that fed on the life force of young people, particularly those with strong psychic sensitivity. It had been drawn to Westfield University because of the high concentration of creative and intellectual energy provided by the student body. Room 27 sat at a specific convergence point of ley lines that made it an ideal portal for interdimensional entity. The Collector had been trying for decades to establish a permanent foothold in the physical world, and each student who died in the room provided it with more power to break through the barriers between dimensions. But the students who died hadn't simply passed on. They had recognized the threat and chosen to remain as guards, using their own spiritual energy to keep the Collector contained. It was a constant battle that required absolute vigilance and sacrifice. Madison faced the same choice that Sarah Chen and the others had confronted. She could leave the room and allow the Collector to grow stronger, eventually breaking through to threaten the entire campus, or she could join the Eternal Guard and help maintain the psychic barrier that kept humanity safe. On December 15, 2019, Madison made her decision. She wrote a detailed account of everything she had experienced, including the true history of Room 27 and the ongoing supernatural battle being fought there. She sealed the document in an envelope and mailed it to her sister with instructions not to open it unless Madison disappeared or died under suspicious circumstance. The next morning, Madison Torres was found unconscious in room 2037, barely alive but in a catatonic state that doctors couldn't explain. She was hospitalized for 3 weeks before being transferred to a long-term care facility, where she remains today, unresponsive but stable. Room 2037 was sealed again, this time permanently. The university officially retired the space, claiming that structural problems made it unsafe for habitation. But late at night, Security guards still report seeing lights in the windows of the sealed room and hearing what sounds like multiple voices engaged in urgent conversation. Madison's sister eventually opened the envelope and shared its contents with paranormal research. The document provided the most detailed account ever recorded of the supernatural battle being fought in Kellner Hall. According to Madison's final notes, the 5 guardian spirits had successfully prevented the collector from breaking through to the physical world, but they were growing weaker with each passing year. They needed new allies, living people who could help strengthen the barrier while remaining in the physical world. Madison had volunteered to serve as a living anchor, using her physical presence to reinforce the psychic defenses while remaining technically alive. It was a dangerous role that required her to exist partially in both worlds, conscious enough to maintain the barrier, but detached enough from physical reality to access spiritual energy. The process had put her into the catatonic state, but according to the other guardians, she was still actively participating in the protection of the campus. Her body remained alive while her consciousness worked alongside the spirits to keep humanity safe from a threat most people would never know existed. Westfield University has never acknowledged the supernatural officially. Madison Torres suffered a psychological breakdown due to academic stress and pre-existing mental health conditions. The room's retirement was simply a coincidence of budget constraints and building maintenance issues. But those who know the truth understand that Madison made the ultimate sacrifice to protect her fellow students. She joined an eternal guard that stands watch over one of the most dangerous supernatural convergence points in North America. And late at night, when the air in Kellner Hall grows cold and the lights flicker without explanation, students sometimes report hearing whispers of encouragement and protection from the sealed room on the second floor. The voices of 6 guardians, led by Sarah Chen and strengthened by Madison Torres, continuing their vigil against forces that would consume the innocent. The whispers say that they're not alone, that there are other guardians at other universities, fighting similar battles at convergence points around the world. They say that sensitive students who experience supernatural phenomena on their campuses aren't being haunted, but they're being called to join a secret army of protectors who sacrifice their normal lives to keep humanity safe from interdimensional predators. Madison Torres was supposed to graduate in May 2020 with a degree in psychology and plans to attend graduate school. Instead, she became something far more important, a guardian of the threshold between worlds, ensuring that her classmates could pursue their dreams without ever knowing about the nightmare that threatens to consume them. Her sacrifice was voluntary, informed, and heroic, but it was also incomplete. According to her final notes, the collector is growing stronger, and more guardians will be needed at convergence points around the world. The whispers in room 2037 continue, night after night, calling out to sensitive students who might have the strength and courage to join the eternal vigil. They promise that it's an honor to serve, a noble sacrifice that protects millions of innocent people. But they also warn that the battle is far from over, and the price of failure would be the consumption of human consciousness itself. Madison Torres is still fighting that battle, suspended between life and death, consciousness and oblivion, humanity and something far beyond human understanding. She whispers encouragement to other potential guardians, sharing the knowledge that some responsibilities are too important to refuse, no matter what they cost. And in dormitories across the country, sensitive students wake at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of whispers calling their names, offering them a choice that will determine not just their own fate, but the future of human consciousness itself.